Am I the a-hole for telling my mom and dad that they have to get their noses pierced if they want to see my daughter again? My husband and I travel down to Mexico to visit with my family. I am an American citizen, my mom and dad are not. My mom and dad got my daughter earrings for her birthday. My daughter's ears are not pierced. She is only 1 year old. I told them that I would save them for her until she was old enough to get her ears pierced. We left my daughter with my parents while we went to meet up with some friends. When we went to pick up my daughter, my mom showed us that we didn't need to wait because they had taken her to get her ears pierced. I got my daughter and I dragged my husband out of there before he lost his shit. We went back to our hotel. I am furious. My husband said that my parents are not allowed to spend time alone with my daughter ever again. I went farther. I said that I would not be bringing her, or any other kids we might have, down here to see my parents. We checked out 3 days early and went home. On the way home, my parents were calling me to see when we were coming over. I ignored all the calls and texts until we were back home in Phoenix. We took a couple of days to think things over and cool down. I finally called them. I asked them not to speak until I was done talking. I told them that my husband and I are upset with them for getting our baby's ears pierced without our permission. I told them that we went back home and probably wouldn't be visiting for a while. They said that my sister and I both had pierced ears when we were babies and that it did not harm us. I said that we were not going to change our minds. They started getting everyone, including my grandmother, to call me and say I was being ridiculous. I talked with my husband and we came up with a compromise. We agreed that we would resume visits, but not alone time, with them if they both got their noses pierced. They said that we are being stupid and that they are not going to do that. I said no problem and hung up. We have started blocking anyone who tries to call us and give us shit for denying my parents their right to see my daughter.
Not the a-hole. They violated your trust in a huge way, and they have absolutely no right to see your daughter, nor do they have a right to see you. They're confusing rights with wants. They were willing to do semi-permanent damage to your baby directly against your wishes just because they want to decorate the baby. It displays a lack of respect for you and for your child. Their aesthetic wants are more important than the grandchild's feelings. And if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, I did this unnecessary thing to a baby before they were old enough to say no, is a terrible way to treat a person. It was very polite for you to save the earring gift for later, until she was old enough to get her ears pierced. They're grown adults, surely they didn't think this meant later today. If you want the piercing to close up properly, don't use hydrogen peroxide or antibacterial soaps. Use a saline solution on the piercing daily. If the piercing seems like it might already be infected, do not remove the earring. We don't want to close an infection inside the body. I recommend you talk to a local body piercer about this, or call a local shop that has all their licenses. I say semi-permanent because I don't personally know whether this will leave a scar if when the piercing closes. It could be permanent, it could go away. I am not telling this mother to take the earring out because I am not a piercing professional, and I will not be giving advice about removing fresh piercings without even seeing it.
Not the a-hole. I read your ultimatum as more tongue-in-cheek. Not that you're actually expecting them to get their noses pierced, but that you're simply enforcing a NC boundary, knowing that they're obviously not getting themselves pierced. I think that's fine and fair. What they did was wrong on so many levels. And since they refuse to apologize or take accountability for their huge lapse of judgment, I think going NC is appropriate.
Same, if you are the grandparent or aunt or uncle, then you don't do stuff like this behind the parents' back then expect to be trusted again. I get in some cultures it is normal for them to pierce the child's ears when young, but if the parent says no, respect that.
Not the a-hole at all. I'd be livid. Though I'd change the ultimatum to something more open-ended like, until you can prove to me that you respect my decisions and boundaries, we won't be back. That way you can decide when you're ready and whether or not you want to see them, rather than it being a relatively minor cosmetic choice for them to decide. They said that my sister and I both had pierced ears when we were babies and that it did not harm us. This is the same horseshit logic my parents tried to put me through when I told them that we weren't circumcising our son. Well, we did it to you and you turned out fine. I was a fucking baby and couldn't say no. You did that unnecessary and irreversible shit without my informed consent. Same thing here. Ear piercings are an unnecessary and irreversible, though mostly healable, procedure that a baby can't agree to or understand.
Am I the a-hole for threatening to make my cousin homeless over some trees? My great-grandpa split up his property among all his kids when he retired. When he did this, it was way outside the city limits. My grandmother only had one kid, my dad, and I am her only grandchild. My dad gave me the land. My piece is the biggest. We are also close enough now for city water and power. Some of the land has been sold to developers. My uncle subdivided his portion into acreages. He kept one and gave each of his kids a plot. My cousin has spent 10 years building his dream home. It is up the hill from my cabin. I bought an old one-room schoolhouse and moved it onto my land. I love it. I will retire there someday, but it needs work. My cousin has been bugging me to clear some of my woodlot. It blocks his view of the valley. He chose that lot. I don't know why he would pick a location with an obstructed view. My wife and I live and work in the city. We only go out to the cabin a few times a year. My cousin lives in his home. Him and his kids constantly throw parties there. We go if we are out at the cabin, but mostly we like having the privacy of the woodlot between us. My cousin didn't. He chopped down 10 of the tallest trees between our properties. All of them were on my side of the fence. The missing trees were the first thing I saw when I got out there. I immediately checked my trail cameras. I had video of him and his sons doing it. I went over and asked him what the fuck? He said the trees were diseased and he did me a favor. I told him I wanted to look at the wood. The trunks were gone and he only had a bunch of the branches. I called a tree guy from the university to come look at the stumps and he told me the trees were fine and that tree theft is a big deal. I told my cousin that he had to do something or I would go to the cops. He said to go ahead. So I did. I also called a lawyer that specializes in tree law. I didn't even know that was a thing. Each tree was worth $50,000. My cousin has gone crazy since he was served. The cops tracked down the trunks. They actually used DNA to identify my logs. The company that bought them agreed to give me the money from the trees and testify against him if I didn't charge them. My uncle and my dad came to talk to me. My cousin doesn't have the money. He would have to sell his house. And if he gets a criminal conviction, it will affect his job. We came to an agreement. My uncle gave me one of his undeveloped lots and some money. I dropped the charges against my cousin. My family is divided. On the one hand, he stole my property. On the other, I took money from my uncle in return for not making my cousin homeless. We planted new trees, but they will take a long time to make up for the old ones. My cousins are furious that I took money that was part of their inheritance, but they are madder at their dumbass brother than they are at me. My dad said that I shouldn't have involved the law in a family dispute.
Not the a-hole just because your family doesn't entitle him to change your property or steal lumber.
I knew tree theft was a crime. I didn't know that they used DNA to trace logs.
You handled it like a family dispute when you went to him first. When he told you to shove it, you were left with no choice but to handle it for real.
I wouldn't call destruction of $500,000 worth of property a family dispute. Not the a-hole.
I shouldn't have involved the law in a family dispute. He wouldn't have had to if the cousin hadn't involved crime into the family dispute.
Not the a-hole. Your cousin did something he knew you had said no to and then lied about it. You did the right thing. His father should take what he had to pay for his screw-up out of his share of the inheritance. He needs to pay for what he did one way or another and not have daddy pay.
Not just that, he dared OP to go to the authorities, then couldn't believe it when he did. What a numbskull. What do you think of these stories? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories.